Chapter 6 Reputation in School. Mia's gaze on Diane turned sharp as she roughly snatched her hands out of Diane's delicate ones. Wow, along with stealing her story, this pretentious little flower had also soiled her reputation by making her seem like a disloyal and selfish friend. She couldn't help but wonder what bad blood she had with this girl, who was the princess in this university. Of course, it was all a misunderstanding, since the story you published wasn't yours to begin with. Mia spat out coldly, which made Diane lower her head as if hurt by her words. Che, friends? She couldn't help but almost puke at the other students' words and their sympathy towards Diane, who was the culprit playing victim. Such a hypocrite, Rain hissed. Diane's facade almost fell as she glared at Rain, but quickly put back her pitiful expression as she addressed Mia. Mia, please don't be upset with me. I know that you don't want to embarrass yourself by admitting that the story belongs to me after you've claimed that it was yours in the first place. You have no idea how scared I was when I heard you almost jumped off the library building. I immediately regretted dragging the story with you. Though I worked hard to get that information, I really wouldn't have minded giving it to you if I knew it meant that much to you. Please forgive me. I'm really willing to go ask the professor to give you the story, as long as you forgive me. Diane sobbed, her long lashes fluttering with tears in her eyes. The other students continued to feel sorry for Diane, looking at Mia with so much more hate. How could Mia not understand what Diane was trying to do? She would be foolish to fall for it. Diane was pretending to apologize, while still claiming the story to be hers and making Mia seem like a bad guy who wanted to reap what she didn't sow. Mia glanced searchingly at Diane, as if she'd find exactly what it was about this hypocritical person she had trusted weeks ago. She must admit, though, the girl's acting skills were award-winning. Look at those tears fall. Were those real? Because if she wasn't the victim of this girl's hypocrisy, she might have just ended up feeling sorry for her like everyone in the class. Don't you feel ashamed of yourself? Lying straight to your own face? Just admit it, that story belongs to Mia, but you stole it for yourself just to get the attention of the news agency. Rain stood up with a bang of her hand on the table, unable to take it anymore. She was really getting upset at this little crying beauty, and if someone didn't get her out of her sight, she might just tear her apart. Diane pretended not to hear Rain's accusation, as she continued to look on pleadingly at Mia, who just continued to stare disbelievingly at her. What was she expected to do? She wasn't going to give Diane the satisfaction she was looking for by shamelessly accepting her false apology of saying she would give the story to her as if it didn't belong to her in the first place. Wouldn't that be confirming the people's accusation that she was trying to forcefully take what wasn't hers? And if she continued to claim it was hers, she knew that wouldn't end well either. They were just going to prove her wrong again. Diane had the reputation as the purest flower in the university. Even all the professors were on her side, then how could she just outrightly continue to accuse her? Diane had won against her this time because Mia gave her trust, but she would make sure there wouldn't be a next time. Mia could feel Rain becoming impatient. Pulling Rain to sit down, she stood up, facing Diane straight as she announced each word. Take the story, and shove it down your throat. Consider it as me having a lowly dog eat scraps beneath my slippers. Having said that, she flashed her dimpled smile, and seeing Diane's stunned expression, she stormed out of the class, completely forgetting that she was to stay for lessons this morning. Close up. Carlos, who was one of Mia's classmates, held up his phone camera to her face as she stormed out of class. This would make awesome news in the school newspapers. He muttered as he replayed the video he'd been taking, pushing his glasses over his nose. Diane's face twisted momentarily before regaining her flower-like appearance. She turned, looking disappointed, and walked outside the class. Who are you calling a dog? I'll make sure that I make your time at this school so miserable you'll regret ever being here. I'm going to make you hate yourself so much, you're going to wish to end your own life, just like you did to me back then. This is just the beginning, Mia Harrison. Diane glared hatefully at the path Mia took outside the class when she was sure she was out of anyone's sight. The expression on her face completely contrasted from her usual lovable little flower appearance. At that moment, she resembled a vengeful demon seeking to devour its prey. Walking out into the open campus, Mia controlled herself to not try to find heights to relieve her anger, so she decided to take a stroll without a definite destination. Though Mia found Diane's hypocrisy absolutely hilarious, she couldn't help but feel irked at the fact that Diane was actually acting so innocent after stealing her hard work. She had risked her life to get that story. Mia's dreams had always been to work in one of the #1 news agencies in the country after graduation, so she could provide a better life for her mother and herself. But who knew that Diane would snatch that one chance she had at more exposure? She had worked so hard to get her hands on the news, but Diane had stolen it from her. She couldn't help but recall that Saturday night when she'd had a lifetime opportunity to get the story. Rain had invited her out for dinner in one of those expensive, high-grand restaurants, and when she had walked into the restaurant, she accidentally overheard a conversation between two men that sparked her interest. One of the men was dressed in a formal suit, as he walked into the restaurant clutching tightly onto a black briefcase. For some reason, seeing the intensely anxious expression on the man's face, she continued to monitor him. The man would repeatedly place his hands on his briefcase as if scared it would disappear as he frantically looked around. She had taken her eyes off him for a while to answer Rain, who was repeatedly talking to her, so as not to appear absent-minded. And by the time she glanced his way again, she saw the man walking into a corner as he repeatedly looked behind him to see if he was being followed. From what she knew of that restaurant, the corner led to the restroom. For some reason, or probably the journalist in her had been evoked, she felt the urge to follow them, and she did, on the pretext of going to use the restroom. But instead of entering the female restroom, she first stood around the hallway, glancing around, confirming that there was no one around. She peeked into the male restroom, but it was completely empty. She took light steps into the restroom when she suddenly heard footsteps. She quickly dashed into one of the cubicles and shut the door tight. Though she couldn't see what was going on, she heard the door to one of the cubicles open. A gruff male voice spoke. "The consignment?" the voice queried. She seemed to have heard a loud clack, which she deduced was the opening of a briefcase. Then came the gruff man's grunt as he shut the briefcase. Then she heard him speak again. "Remember, we never met." The door to the cubicle opened, followed by a set of footsteps as they exited the restroom. As she peeked from the cubicle, she caught the sight of a muscular man dressed like a hooligan exiting the restroom with the man in the suit following closely behind. Her curiosity spiked to its highest peak, so she stealthily followed the man in the suit, who chose to exit through the back door. She had pondered following the hooligan, but he seemed like an extremely alert person and would easily detect her following him. However, the man in the suit seemed a bit more amateur and timid due to how nervous he looked, as if this was his first time doing such business. The sky was getting darker. She had sent a short text to Rain, apologizing and cooking up some sort of emergency to excuse her sudden disappearance. She continued to follow him downtown till he reached a deserted alleyway. He took a swift turn without bothering to look behind him. Mia noticed that the man seemed to become more confident as he was probably assuming no one could see him since he'd entered an empty street. Before she knew it, they had arrived at a deserted, worn-down building, which the man entered straight up. She lingered at the entrance for a while before walking in as well. The inside of the building was dark, with a slight woody smell. The broken roof allowed for tiny openings, making the completely dark building have a slight illumination from the moonlight. "Are the consignments delivered?" The man's husky voice echoed in the spacious room, his appearance obstructed by the paper he held to his face. He asked the man in a black suit standing before him, as he moved back and forth on a rocking chair. "Yes, boss," the person in the suit replied respectfully. His neck seemed to have straightened from his earlier timid look. "They don't suspect a thing," he added. "Good." The man on the rocking chair suddenly halted his movements, shifting the paper from his face. He beckoned at the man in the suit with a twitch of his finger. The man in the suit pulled out a red satchel from the inner pocket of his suit as he respectfully handed it to the man he referred to as boss. A wide grin appeared on the boss's face, his rough skin crinkled up distortedly. A brown scar ran across the side of his cheeks up to his ear, giving him an ominous feel. Mia gulped, as she peeked through the window of the room the two men were in. As she saw the man called boss's appearance, if a 5-year-old saw such a freaky smile, they'd have nightmares for years. "Ha ha ha, the first batch of the new shipments. Those idiots wouldn't know a thing." The man laughed in satisfaction. He poured the contents from the little satchel into his palms. Tiny beads glittered with the reflected moonlight. Mia squinted to ascertain what the tiny beads were. "Diamonds," she gasped. "Call up Guzman, tell him to set the bomb and blow up the place. They'll think twice next time before messing with Doc Kroll," the man called boss instantly ordered. "But boss, the next shipments will be arriving in 2 days at the eastern port of Zen City. and their hideout is situated at the exact location. Wouldn't it interrupt the arrival of the goods? He queried with a worried expression. The boss looked up at him. That's exactly why the big boss ordered me to send Guzman for the job. Let him take care of that. I'm sure he'll do a fine job. It won't interrupt the arrival of the goods, the boss stated confidently. The man in the suit's eyes lit up with understanding. Yes, boss. Seeing the man in the suit heading out, Mia quickly concealed herself behind a huge crate in the building as she watched him leave the building and disappear completely. She finally sighed in relief as she sat down in a taxi, unable to believe what she'd just uncovered. Her breath still coming in huffs. The name Da Kroll ringing in her mind like the gong of hell. Who in Zen City didn't know the infamous underworld organization named Da Kroll? They were the biggest mafia organization in the whole country. It was rumored that they had their hideouts scattered all around the country. And in Zen City was the place they were least expected to appear next. She just uncovered the location of one of the biggest mafia gangs in the country. Though due to the fact the place was unguarded, she doubted if it was actually their permanent hideout. But nonetheless, she had information about their smuggled diamonds and when their next shipments would be arriving. Though this was big information to the police, on another hand, this was news. As a journalist, this was incredibly exciting to her. She suddenly remembered her big presentation in school. If she presented this news, she might just get a chance to attract a few news agencies' interest. Her lifelong dream. But then again, she suddenly thought of the severity of the situation. If she kept this to herself to report, she might end up jeopardizing the chances of the police catching the syndicate. But if she immediately reported it to the authorities, some news agency would take the credit for the story. What should she do? She suddenly thought about asking advice from Rain, then dismissed the idea on second thought. Rain was a hot-headed person. She'd never take the fact that Mia ran straight into the hideout of a drug syndicate lightly. The one time she had burst into a private property guarded by dogs, Rain almost plucked her ears out. She thought of someone else whom she could share this with, and the image of her newly made friend appeared in her mind. Yes, Diane was an easier option. They had gotten a bit close these past few days over the course of working on an assignment together. Without hesitation, she pulled out her phone from her jean pocket. Not wanting to risk the cab driver overhearing her conversation, she opted to text instead. Not a few minutes passed when Mia had sent that message before Diane's reply arrived, urging Mia to calm down and not worry, also not to share the news with anyone else yet until they met in the morning to discuss over it. Mia didn't even get suspicious at Diane's next message asking for more details, which she divulged completely. For months now, she had been after her big story to present. Who knew that one would miraculously fall into her hands? Her professor had wanted something fresh, original, exciting. She had spent a whole night outside, ran into a pack of dogs, all while trying to do her research. Though she had got her story, it was nowhere near as good as this one. She'd gone home that night with mixed thoughts, but then made 2 files for tomorrow's presentation. One for the story she'd been chasing for months, and another for the story she'd just uncovered tonight. But unexpectedly, the next morning she encountered a betrayal. Unknown to Mia, Diane had notified the police of the information that same night, after posting it on her blog, which she used as her evidence that the story belonged to her. The police had followed Diane's information, and Da Kroll consignments were seized, though a few of them managed to escape. Chapter 7: The Substitute Professor. Clearing her thoughts, Mia's steps hurried along the cobbled paths in the university grounds. She clutched her bag to her chest with her head lowered. Just when she was about to make a turn towards a left intersection of the cobbled roads, ow! She realized a second too late that she had collided against someone. The papers the person was initially holding fluttered down in the air. A pleasant yet familiar scent wafted into her nose. She looked up, meaning to apologize, and suddenly froze. Her gaze met a pair of deep-set, gray eyes glowing with frost. She gasped, trailing down his nose to the defined Cupid's bow leading to a pair of alluring thin lips that were slightly raised in a scowl, his brows slightly knitted together in displeasure. Mia gazed at the familiar handsome man in front of her in a daze. It was him, the man she had been thinking about last night. She only resumed her senses when the deep masculine voice said, "Excuse me." Mia suddenly jolted, trying to peel her eyes from his face. The words of apology she had initially wanted to voice remained stuck in her throat as she continued to stare at the man, even until he squatted down, patiently picking up the fallen papers in a swift and fluid manner. Her gaze still followed him as he stood up to face her after picking up his papers. "Next time, watch where you're going." His deep voice spoke again with an unfazed tone, before walking around her to leave. She finally regained her senses when he disappeared into the school. What is he doing here? She wondered with a frown while taming the fluttery feeling in her stomach. It was really him, the dark angel on the rooftop, but why did she let him leave without an introduction? What if he disappeared again? She hadn't even bothered trying to find out who he was, just letting him disappear just like that. How stupid of her to lose the opportunity of being acquainted with him. Stupid Mia, she pouted, hitting her own head. Wait, I can still go after him, right? With that thought, she swiftly ran in the direction she saw him leave. Reaching the path from which he disappeared, she realized it led back to the class she was supposed to have in the morning. She had stormed out, irked by Diane's presence, completely forgetting about her morning lessons. Just then, she spotted Rain's shadow from afar, looking around searchingly before finally landing on her. She hurriedly walked towards her. "Mia, where the hell have you been? I've been looking all over for you. You just suddenly walked out without even waiting for me," Rain nagged. "Sorry, I wasn't paying attention, I just wanted to get away from the class." Mia apologized before adding, "Right, did the class already start?" "Yes, Mr. Olson's substitute already arrived. I excused myself, saying I needed to use the restroom, to look for you." She hadn't followed Mia out immediately because she'd wanted to give her a little space after Diane's little stunt, but she ended up taking longer than anticipated. Rain couldn't help but fear that she might have gone to the top of some building again. "Substitute? Mr. Olson was replaced?" Mia suddenly paused her steps to ask as they'd started walking towards the class. "Yeah, he was admitted to a hospital for cancer surgery last week, remember? And this week the replacement is supposed to be taking his place." Rain's voice raised enthusiastically as she said, "God. You need to have seen the commotion in class when he arrived. Damn, he's good looking." All the girls in class were almost falling over themselves. Even Diane couldn't help herself. You should have seen the mesmerized look on her face. I wonder who made such a gorgeous man a professor. He should be a model instead with those looks and that body. Really, you should have seen him. Rain ranted on in excitement, and Mia couldn't help but remember the face of the man she had seen earlier. Finding Rain's words an exaggeration, however good-looking the new professor could be, there was no way he could compare to this gray-eyed Prince Charming. If Rain saw him, she'd immediately dismiss her words of praise for the new professor, however good-looking he was, Mia thought. Finally arriving at the class, Rain proceeded to enter, taking her seat, when she suddenly realized Mia was standing by the door with a shocked look on her face, staring at the new professor. She couldn't help but let out a smile in amusement. Was Mia also mesmerized by the new professor's beauty? Rain thought, but the stupid girl, why was she just standing there in a daze? She was supposed to just enter, not letting him notice her, but too late, he already did. Neil raised his head, glancing at the student by the door who had just arrived. He frowned, recognizing her. Wasn't she the careless student that had just bumped into him earlier? He thought, as he didn't even recognize her as the girl from the rooftop. She had a pleasantly surprised look on her face, with her palms against her lips as she gasped disbelievingly, in awe. Neil wasn't surprised at the girl's fawning expression. He'd gotten a lot of that since arriving at this school, and he couldn't be bothered by it. However, he couldn't help his rising irritation. "You're late. Since I'm just starting the class today, you can take a seat, but be sure that next time you're late, you can forget about attending my class," he warned in a firm and rigid tone. Since he would be posing as a damn professor, he had to act like one. Not bothering to spare her another glance, he turned to the class. Mia dragged her feet to her seat while occasionally turning her glance towards the strict man. He was actually the new professor, and a stern one at that, she thought in disbelief. He wasn't friendly at all. Rain shot her a knowing smile as Mia sat beside her. Stunned. Huh? God! Where did such a handsome man appear from? I wonder if he has a girlfriend. What are you looking so dazed for? She playfully nudged Mia as she whispered. It was him, Mia whispered back. Him who? Do you know him? Don't tell me he's the Prince Charming of your dreams. Rain said jokingly, as Mia had never been in a relationship, claiming she was waiting for the Prince Charming of her dreams, a loving gentleman who would give her flowers and his coat when the weather turned cold. Rain would always tease her, saying she'd remain single forever. What Prince Charming of my dreams? He is that man who pulled me yesterday on the rooftop. Mia whispered with a frown. Rain shot the man a look, trying to recognize him. On that day, though she'd seen the person who supposedly saved Mia, she hadn't bothered to look at him thoroughly. She did, however, remember his tall and broad back, which she could recognize from his build. Oh crap, it really is. Now I see why you called me up, disturbing my sleep last night. It turns out you're nursing a crush for our new professor. Rain grinned widely, shrinking her neck so the professor doesn't notice her speaking. Leo Bennett. Even his name is attractive. Rain added, glancing at the name written in bold letters on the board. It seemed he'd already introduced himself before she and Mia arrived. Leo. Mia breathed out the name. Mia felt every sound from the room fade into the background, even Rain's whispers beside her ears. She leaned on the table, resting her chin in her palms as she lost herself staring at the new professor. His eyes were the most beautiful thing she'd ever set her eyes on. His voice was deep and masculine. His actions and every movement seemed to slow down entirely, his luscious thin lips parting slowly as he spoke. Whatever today's lesson was, it didn't interest her as much as the person giving the lesson. Throughout the class, not a single word from today's lesson registered into Mia's brain, as all her attention was focused on the person giving the lectures. She left the class with a bounce in her steps. In the outskirts of Zen City, inside of a huge mansion, a man could be seen sitting on a rocking chair. As he slowly moved back and forth, an ugly expression on his face, making his wrinkled skin look even more frightening. A deep brown scar ran the length of his cheeks all the way to his ears. His eyes closed tightly, yet he seemed alert to his surroundings. Did you find out what I asked? His hoarse voice echoed across the spacious hallway along with the repetitive tapping of boots against the tiled floors as a few burly men entered the hall. Boss, we found out that the person who disclosed the information was some young girl. She's currently studying to become a journalist at the Ivy Grove Institute. She's the daughter of some rich businessman in Zen City. Her name's Diane Foster. Though we couldn't find out how she knew about this information. A tall man with a muscular build reported. He seemed to be the leader of the men who just entered the mansion, as the rest just stood respectfully behind him like bodyguards. Humph, merely a little rat trying to mess with me. Apparently, Caleb wasn't as careful as he thought the other day, letting himself get followed by a little brat. Unfortunately for her, she doesn't know who she's messing with. The boss snorted. So what do we do with her now, boss? The man queried with a ruthless expression, seemingly ready to take the girl's life without a moment's hesitation. Nothing, for now. Just let her be, but monitor her every move, every action. I want to see how much more she knows about us. She wouldn't have just followed Caleb for no reason. The moment you notice anything suspicious, report back to me, and if she makes a wrong move, then eliminate her before she ruins another operation for us. Do you understand? The boss's voice sounded dull and lazy as he ordered. Yes, boss. The man lowered his head respectfully, before turning to leave along with his men. The expression on the boss turned even deadlier. Chapter 8 Irresponsible Student. After having lunch with Rain at the school cafeteria, Mia headed for Mr. Jasper's office. Mr. Jasper was the supervisor for the assignment which she had failed to deliver on the day of the presentation. Although she could have presented her other story, she was too shocked and upset with Diane that she ended up abandoning it altogether. They had had story assignments before, but usually it was about insider news and something that could be published in the school newspaper only. This one project was a chance to get published in an actual newspaper company, which she lost due to Diane. It was to find fresh, interesting stories worthy of making headlines, and Diane no doubt did that now. Mia gave a light knock at the door, and hearing a response, she headed inside, greeting the man behind the desk lightly, who only replied with a snort, not even sparing her a glance from the bunch of papers he was fiddling with on his desk. After a few long minutes, the professor finally stopped what he was doing to glance at Mia once. The displeasure in his eyes at her sight could not be mistaken. No doubt to Mr. Jasper, Diane was his favorite student after she displayed her immense dedication and love for her studies by working hard on the project, while Mia was just another irresponsible student with personality issues. He eyed her disapprovingly before beckoning her to take a seat. Why are you here, Miss Harrison? Sir, I'm here to talk about the assignment. I apologize for my actions the other day, and I really hope I can get another chance to present a new story for the project. Mia knew fully well how displeased the man was with her and wouldn't even think about arguing about what happened the other day. On top of that, the rumors circulating about her being suicidal made her appear like a really troubled person with a personality problem. The only thing she could do was try to make amends by proving to them that she was worthy of the scholarship and wasn't an irresponsible student like they thought her to be. Mr. Jasper looked at her across from him with a blank gaze. "Well, I'm afraid there is nothing I can do for you, Miss Harrison. You have already failed the assignment, which will leave a huge dent in your overall scores. Besides, you have done a thing that's considered a huge crime in the news industry: plagiarism. Had you been working at some organization, your company could get sued for your actions, and that's not the worst-case scenario. You could ruin that company's reputation to a point that it would be hard to rectify. You should be lucky this little incident isn't put into your records, else I'm afraid no company would want to hire you after you graduate." Mr. Jasper berated her in a stern voice. "Sir, I apologize for my actions, and I assure you it was all just a misunderstanding. Sir, you're aware I'm on scholarship. I can't afford to lose my scores. Please, can you give me another chance, sir? I assure you this time I'll carry out the task, and I'll make sure not to break any rules." Mia pleaded. Ivy Grove Institute was one of the largest in the country, with the best courses and best facilities. It could be said it was the dream school of most people. And she wouldn't want to mess any chance of getting a bad name in her grades, nor lose her scholarship. Mia had gotten in only due to her good grades in high school. She was already content. At least her mother wouldn't be burdened by having to pay the tuition, plus more expenses at the shop. But if her scores lowered, she might just end up losing her scholarship. This assignment was to give the students more exposure and a huge boost in their GPA, a chance Mia really wouldn't want to miss. Mr. Jasper sighed at her words. He must say, before this little incident, Mia and Diane were two of his best students of the second year. He was actually quite surprised to find out Mia was actually that kind of person as to try to snatch something she didn't work for. But nevertheless, he wasn't a completely heartless man and knew some students wouldn't be able to afford the school's tuition, so he decided to give her another chance. "Fine, you will restart the assignment. However, I don't have time to reassess you, so I'm going to refer you to another professor for the time being." "Let me see." Mia's face broke into a happy, relieved smile. "Thank you so much, sir." The man squinted into his glasses as he pulled a few papers, mumbling, "I don't think there's any." "Oh, here, Professor Bennett. I think he might be available as he has just replaced Mr. Olson today. He would be here until Mr. Olson recovers." Mia's heart skipped a beat at the name mentioned. Wasn't that the new professor who had pulled her from the rooftop? "Here, take these to Professor Bennett's office, the second office in Block 29. He'll know what to do. You're to report back your assignments and everything else to him." Mr. Jasper handed her a stack of papers, dismissing her to get back to his work. Mia's mind was in a jumble as she walked across the hallway in Block 29. Was it the same Professor Bennett? The one she was always thinking about? Her heart was suddenly filled with anticipation. She didn't know any other professor surnamed Bennett in this faculty. Furthermore, he was the only substitute professor in the university. She snapped out of her thoughts as she realized she had already walked past the second office. She drew in a breath as she knocked on the door slowly. "Come in," the magnetically enchanting voice sounded, and she almost forgot to breathe. Pushing the door open, she stepped in, and her eyes lit up at the sight of the person sitting behind the desk. "Oh my God, it's you." Mia gasped before she could control herself. Neil, who was initially immersed in his work, suddenly looked up at the student who just entered his office, hearing her gasp. "It's you. I knew it. Even fate allowed me to come to you. Don't you think this is fate? We just keep meeting each other, Mia smiled widely, letting herself into the office, sitting across from him comfortably without receiving permission. "What?" Confusion written across his face, he queried. Mia drew in a breath in surprise. "You don't remember me? That's unfortunate. I thought this was fate." "Doesn't matter. It still is fate." She mumbled more to herself than him, as he could only hear part of what she said. She suddenly extended her hand. "Hi, I'm Mia Harrison. It's nice to meet you again. Did you really not remember me? I'm the first person you saw after landing from the sky." Mia joked, grinning widely, her almond-shaped eyes shining radiantly as she waited patiently with her hand extended over the table for him to shake. Bet it'd be nice to feel his hand in hers, Mia thought amusingly. His face continued to hold no expression as he glanced from her face to her outstretched hand and said, "You're the student who arrived late to my first class. What do you want?" His voice rang out firm and tough. Mia pouted disappointedly as he didn't take her outstretched hand. For some reason, she seemed to have forgotten that the person before her was supposed to be her teacher, not someone she could casually go and make friends with. Right, straight to business then. She sighed, handing him the stack of papers from Mr. Jasper. Neil raised his eyes to look at her questioningly, as she had handed him the papers with no prior explanation, looking down at her hands with pursed lips. She suddenly realized the look in his eyes and said, "Mr. Jasper asked me to give those to you." Then, as if remembering something, she broke into a smile and added, "It seems we're going to be seeing more of each other now that you are in Ivy Grove." She winked. Neil raised his brows at her actions. Was this fool trying to flirt with him? How bold of the idiot. There were quite a number of girls who would look at him with hearts in their eyes since he arrived at this school. However, seeing the unwelcome look in his eyes, none of them could have the guts to approach him and speak to him casually. Yet this one over here was openly trying to flirt with him. Take that back to him. Tell him I don't work with irresponsible students. He threw the papers back to her, his eyes still remaining frosty. Mia was taken aback. Her smile immediately vanished. What? Why not? After recovering from her shock, she suddenly asked, "What do you mean by you don't work with irresponsible students?" Pardon? He raised his head to look at her again. I mean, why won't you work with me? And in what way am I irresponsible? She boldly asked, defending herself. You don't think you're irresponsible? Then let me tell you. First, you arrive at my class late, without the decency to apologize. I only let you sit through that class because I wanted to. Second, you have no respect whatsoever for your teachers. And thirdly, you lack professional ethics. Tell me, is that what you call responsible? His deep voice laced with ice as he spoke each word, his face not showing any emotion. Mia found herself speechless. Fine, the man was her teacher, all right, but who told him to be so good-looking? If he was an average-looking, middle-aged professor, she wouldn't have behaved that way. Besides, she was only trying to be friendly. This morning she had been too shocked to apologize for entering the class after him, but how was that her fault? It appeared she'd have to coax him into agreeing to be her professor, or else she would fail her project for this semester. And that wouldn't be good for her scholarship. Mia sighed dramatically. Sir, I apologize. Is that enough, or do I have to prove it? I'm very professional, really. Besides, it's just this one assignment. After that, you wouldn't have to work with me anymore. She clasped her hands, peeking at his face from her side of the table. Say yes? She blinked her doe eyes like she always did with her friend, Owen. But apparently, it wasn't working on him at all. He shot her a deadly glare that almost made her lose her balance on the chair. Mia didn't mind him glaring at her. In fact, she could have sat in the office all day to pester him if he hadn't gotten the security to chase her out of his office. Mia sighed dejectedly as she left Block 29, walking aimlessly on the campus. What a grumpy man he was. Not even taking pity on her. He was her only chance. She definitely wouldn't allow him to refuse. She was going to find a way to convince him to supervise her assignment. No matter how grumpy he was, she would find a way to make him agree. Chapter 9: Convincing the Grumpy Man. That night, upon getting home, Mia had dinner with her mother and, after a lot of persuasion, finally got to help her mother with a few chores before taking a shower and getting ready for bed. She picked up her cat, Robbie, a white, fluffy snow cat with beautiful blue eyes. She had adopted the cute little stray cat from the street. Mia recalled the first time the cat had followed her all the way to the shop she'd gone to run an errand for her mother. When she had attempted to pet the cat, it had stayed and rubbed its fluffy body against her palm. She had immediately fallen in love with the cute little cat and took it home with her, naming him Robbie. And now, Robbie had become her greatest companion in the house. She ran her fingers around his soft fur, and the cat closed its eyes, purring. She lay on her bed, petting the cat. Closing her eyes, the beautiful image of the gray-eyed man in his office, sitting with a frosty expression, concentrating on his job, appeared in her mind. Such a cold person. A smile slowly surfaced on her face. Her two dimples, plus her slightly damp hair in the dim lighting of her bedroom, made her appear cuter. Turning over on her bed, she murmured to herself, Mr. Bennett, first you don't want to mentor me, now you're giving me sleepless nights on how to convince you to mentor me. Having failed at her attempts to fall asleep, she pulled out her phone and checked into the school's online forum. Seeing the trending contents on the forum, she quickly sat up on her bed. "The new professor is a Prince Charming," read the headline of the thread. It was posted barely a few hours ago, but the thread had already gotten over 1,000 comments. Damn, my heart literally stopped the first time I saw him. He's so handsome. I can't even help myself from following him around throughout the day to all his classes. He's my ideal man, my idol. I wish I could get one chance, just one, to kiss those beautiful lips goodnight. I would gladly die happily. I can't believe it, the man of my dreams has suddenly appeared before me. I can't wait to have our dream wedding. That's all it can ever be, a dream. Do you think he'll ever like someone like you? Hey, some people just can't wake up to reality. All of you, stop fighting over my man. With someone like him, of course he's only meant for me. If you all keep fighting, you'll just be wasting your time. Guys, relax, he's so handsome. Do you all want to taint that beauty by shamelessly coveting him like this? I think a handsome man like that is only meant for another equally beautiful woman. I vote for Diane, the most beautiful girl in school. That's right, beauty deserves beauty. I vote for Diane as well. Diane is so beautiful and she's kind-hearted. Of course, only someone like her can deserve a prince. More threads similar to these ones ran the length of the post, and it wasn't the end as more people continued to comment every few seconds. Mia continued to read through the thread with her mouth agape. How shameless, drooling on a man whom they don't know if he's in a relationship or even married. Pathetic. Mia scoffed to herself, but then she couldn't help but agree, he was too good-looking to be resisted by girls. Even she couldn't resist him. However, she bet he wouldn't pay any of them any attention with that personality of his. And Diane? Tisk, she'd like to see her try and hit on Leo Bennett. Diane had dated almost all the handsome dudes on campus, Mia thought to herself. The professor might be handsome with beautiful eyes. Mia dared not cross the lines. All she needed from him now was for the man to supervise her project assignment. Diane could throw her beautiful self at the professor for all Mia cared. Actually, the reason why everyone thought Diane was the most beautiful was because of the way she carried herself, how she dressed, plus she had a wealthy background. True, Diane was beautiful, however, compared to Mia, anyone who had eyes would know who was more attractive. Mia had a kind of beauty that was innocent and cute. Though she wasn't born in a rich family and didn't have the privilege to wear expensive luxury clothes and designer items and makeup, she was still beautiful in her own way. Her beauty wasn't the type that screamed in your face. It was one that was capable of warming hearts and drawing people in. Actually, before the incident with Diane, there were still many people comparing them in terms of beauty, and a whole lot more rooting for Mia over Diane whenever they appeared on screen in the media center room. But after everything happened, Mia's beauty seemed to fade in everyone's eyes, since that's how things were. A beautiful woman, however attractive, will turn sour if she had a bad character. But of course, to Mia, she didn't care about physical appearance, so none of these things mattered to her at all. All she wanted was a chance to show the world what she'd got and give her mother a good life. An idea suddenly struck Mia. She rolled out of bed and grabbed her laptop. She did a background check on Leo Bennett. Though she barely found any personal information about him, she was satisfied with the little she got. Mia slept peacefully afterwards, not bothering about anything else, as she'd already figured out how to convince him into helping her tomorrow. Uptown Zen City. Inside of a luxurious-looking mansion, in a spacious room decorated with a golden and lavender theme. A beautiful young woman could be seen smiling as she stood in front of the floor-length mirror in the room. She fixed her hair repeatedly, turning her face this way and that in clear admiration for herself. So pretty. Diane complimented herself with a satisfied smile before moving away from the mirror. She picked up her phone, logging into the school's online forum, and her face broke into a wide grin. Of course, she suddenly said at one of the comments, nodding her head in agreement. Everyone else could see that the handsome professor was only meant for someone like her. However, she remembered how she had tried to send him suggestive glances and beautiful shy smiles in class, but his gaze didn't even linger on her for a second. Maybe he didn't notice her, after all, who could ignore such beauty as herself? She was even more certain he didn't see her, the more she thought about it. There was not a single man on this earth who could be able to resist her charms. The type of man just hadn't been born yet, and if he was born, then she was sure just one smile from her would melt him. She chuckled to herself at that thought. What could she do? It wasn't her fault she possessed this level of charm. Men just get enchanted by her, and there's nothing she could do about it. And she was absolutely certain this new professor would be no different. She suddenly began to think of ways to create their beautiful chance encounter, one that would make it evident that they were made for each other. Her face lightened up as an idea struck her. Why would she have to be the one to do something, when she had this many fans at her beck and call? She wouldn't lift a finger, and the professor would be hers. All she needed to do was pull a few strings with a few of her die-hard fans, and that was it. She could already picture the face of that breathtaking man, catering to her every need, falling all over her. She pulled out her phone and typed a few strings of words. After that, she kept her phone with a relaxed expression. Now all she needed to do was just wait and watch. Her fans will get the rest done on her behalf. The room suddenly filled with the soft sounds of her laughter. The next morning, after having her first class for the day, Mia headed straight for the second office in Block 29. After knocking lightly and receiving a response, she strode in happily. "Good morning, sir, good morning, sir." She coughed lightly, straightening her posture as she stood at the entrance obediently. He wanted an obedient student, right? Okay, no problem, she would give just that. She would be obedient until he would help her pass her project. Neil hummed a reply to her greetings, tearing his eyes off the computer. "What do you want again?" he asked in a straightforward manner, not liking the fact that this girl kept appearing in his presence. Mia shrunk her neck and silently stepped forward, dropping the papers in front of him. She moved backwards and stood quietly like a high school student. Without looking at her, Neil continued to type rapidly on his computer before finally glancing at the papers. He picked one up to have a look and then shook a finger in dismissal. "Haven't I told you? I won't work with you. Go back to Mr. Jasper and have him assign you to someone else." Having said that plainly, he returned to his typing. "But Mr. Jasper said there's no one else available to mentor me on this. That's why he sent me to you." Mia spoke meekly with her neck lowered. She stole a glance at his expression, which remained unfazed, before adding, "And besides, Mr. Jasper said I was too unruly, and that no one else could handle my wild nature better than you. He also said if you mentored me, then I'll definitely become a more responsible student because you are a very strict and straightforward professor and that he admired your skills in your resume." Mia sighed at the end of her words, stealing glances at his expression. Although his face remained cold, she could see the slight raise of his brows in agreement, his eyes glinting with a light full of pride. Though, one thing Neil would agree with was the fact that he was indeed good at discipline, and this one here seemed to be lacking in that. Mia continued speaking. "Then again, maybe you're right, I should just go find another professor, but that might take really long. It doesn't matter, I'll just have to bear with it, and if I fail, then I guess I'll just accept that." She made sure to emphasize the words, "fail," as she spoke. She pitifully picked the papers off the table one after another, drawing her words. Seeing no reaction from him, she turned to leave with tiny steps, dragging her feet against the floor sluggishly. She had already reached the door but no response from him. And to think she had gone and looked into his profile to know more about him before coming here. She could have sworn he'd quickly accept her. Guess she was wrong. Her shoulders slumped in disappointment as she opened the door to leave after sending him one last glance. 2 o'clock tomorrow. If you're late this time, then consider your assignment failed. He dropped his words hurriedly. Mia's face brightened in excitement as she quickly looked back at him, but he continued to work as if he wasn't the person who just spoke. But how could she mistake it? Thank you so much," she said gratefully. She lingered a little, staring at him dazedly. He glanced at her with a raised brow that said, "What are you still doing here?" She quickly regained her senses, dashing out of the office as she smiled along the hallway. Chapter 10: Stolen Clothes. Immediately after leaving Block 29, Mia's phone beeped with an incoming message. Checking it, she realized it was a message from Rain that said, "I'm waiting for you by the gym building." She quickly headed towards the gym, with a smile still on her face. Mia, look this way." She heard a familiar voice shout from behind her on her way to the gym. Instinctively, she turned to see who it was when, click, came the shutter sound of a camera in front of her. "What?" Mia looked at Carlos confusedly, standing in front of her, holding a camera up to his face. The guy smiled widely, pushing his glasses up his nose. "Nice one there, Mia," he complimented, holding onto the camera with which he'd just taken her picture. "What was that for, Carlos?" she asked, looking at her classmate in surprise. But he laughed again, revealing his bunny front teeth. "Didn't you hear? The council is holding a small event that picks the most beautiful females from every faculty. Now, this is going to be our entry of the little event. It's going to make headlines," he said, pointing at the picture of Mia he just took. "I'm not entering any event. Delete that." She tried to snatch the camera from his hands, but he lifted it above his head. As he was taller than her, Mia jumped, trying to reach it. What was this guy talking about? Before this, she and Carlos were not very close at all. In fact, they rarely spoke, and now he was suddenly trying to take pictures of her to enter in some stupid school event she had no interest in. She only knew him as one of the top students in class and for another thing he was most known for, his love for news. Well, one could call it that way if one was a journalist. However, if one was a normal person, they'd say he loved to gossip. He was the type of person to poke his nose in any situation as long as it involved a good story. If it was going to give him news, he was there. He didn't care who you are or what you feel. Carlos would do anything to get a juicy news. Not having any idea of what Carlos was up to, she glared at him, panting tiredly. It was no use chasing him around anyway. The guy was a nosy Parker. Carlos clutched his camera to his chest, standing a little distance away from Mia, who had given up chasing him. "Oh, come on, Mia. We'll make the headlines. Don't you want to be on the front page of the school paper for the next month event?" He tried to convince her. "No, I'm not interested. Now delete that." Whatever drama he was up to, she really didn't want to involve herself in it. But he wasn't about to budge. He turned on his heels and ran off. "Fine then. I'm just going to make the headlines myself and get you into the event." He left her with those words as he ran off. "Hey, wait, Carlos!" Mia yelled after him, but too late. The guy had already run off into the corner. What was up with this guy today? Mia shook her head, deciding to ignore him, as she made for where she was going to meet Rain. Carlos stopped running, spotting a place to sit underneath a tree. He headed there, sitting down. He turned on the camera, checking out the pictures he took with a satisfied expression. One showed Mia smiling brightly, her dimples prominent, wearing a plain white shirt with black jeans. She seemed to be talking to someone beside her, but the other person was cut out. The next picture was taken of her in the cafeteria as she gazed hungrily at something with her lips pressed tightly together in a cute manner. And the last one was the one he just took, her hair blowing up slightly in the wind as she had turned abruptly, an inquisitive gaze in her eyes, staring straight into the camera. He happily copied them to his SD card. He had been sneakily following Mia since yesterday after hearing about the event, taking her pictures stealthily. However, he still needed a close-up and one of her staring into the camera, so he'd played this trick to get the picture. His major was photojournalism, and in this upcoming event, which hadn't been publicly announced yet, every photojournalism student was going to show what they'd got along with juicy news. Carlos wasn't one of the people who picked favorites due to a person's reputation. He would only do something in all honesty. Just like right now, he could choose to root for any other person in the event, but he chose Mia since he believed her to be the prettiest in their faculty, and he would be the one to publish her among the participants when it would be announced to everyone. He'd only ever do anything beneficial to himself, and if the girl he supports wins, he'd have an opportunity to be featured on the headlines, or better still, he could be given the responsibility of handling the pictures in the school newspaper. Mia arrived at the gym to find Rain waiting for her at the entrance. Spotting Rain, Mia smiled brightly. "Hey, what took you so long?" Rain smiled back. "I just met with someone crazy, can you believe that? That Carlos suddenly starts taking pictures of me. He should be lucky I didn't get a hold of him. I would have broken his legs along with his darn camera." She relayed the story with a displeased expression. "No need to be so bothered by it. He probably just likes you." Rain winked. Peeved. "That gossip monger? Like someone? He's only doing it for another story of his. What did he call it again? Some event of sorts." Mia laughed, shrugging it off as they climbed the stairs into the gym building. "Could it be? He's taking your pictures for that event the council organized." Rain said in realization. "I must say, the guy's got eyes. At least he's not one of Diane's pathetic fans. I'm damn sure with you in the event, Diane's winning will be snatched off her hands." Rain added, pleased with Carlos's actions. It was an annual event that the council had organized for the fun of it. 2 months before the event, pictures of the participants would be posted on the school newspapers while the students would campaign for the winner before it would be announced on the day of the event. The most beautiful lady and gentleman who got the most votes would be crowned the Queen and King of the Year, and would also have the opportunity to be on the news headlines and the billboard of Zen City. However, the event hadn't taken place last year for some reasons unknown to the students, which was why most of the sophomore year students didn't know about the event. I don't want to participate in some silly event. I have too many problems on my list already, like my project to pass this semester. Besides, there's no way I can win over Diane. And even if I could, I'm not interested, Mia stated dryly. Of course, you're not. Rain teased, a sly expression on her face, which Mia missed because she was looking straight ahead. Mia's face brightened as she suddenly nudged her friend. Guess what? Rain looked on questioningly. Just guess, Mia insisted. You know I can never guess anything. I'm terrible at it. She then paused slightly, glancing at Mia before adding, but, with the stupid smile on your face, I know it has something to do with Mr. Bennett, right? He agreed to be my supervisor for the project assignment, she exclaimed in excitement. Rain laughed. You really have a huge crush on the professor, huh? What crush? I have no such thing on him or anyone. I just want every chance to stare into those gray eyes. For some reason, they remind me of someone whom I can't seem to remember. Mia pursed her lips as she couldn't shake off the feeling she had every time she looked into those eyes. It was like she'd seen them before, yet it felt like she'd imagined it. Well, isn't that considered a crush? Rain probed. No, I just like his eyes, not him. Well, if possible, you can say I have a crush on his eyes. Mia chuckled softly. Leo Bennett was one of the most handsome men she'd ever set her eyes on, but she knew when to dream and when to be realistic. Liking him won't get her anywhere, nor will it add to her good grades. Humph. Just admit it. You have a crush on him. Rain continued to tease as they both entered the martial arts section of the gym after changing into their uniforms in the locker room. Since arriving at the Ivy Grove Institute, Mia had always been dragged by Rain to learn martial arts. Though Mia didn't like it at first, she eventually got used to it. Plus, she found out that it was a great way to defend herself. After their training for the day, Mia proceeded into the locker room. She felt very uncomfortable at how much she was sweating right now. The training today was intense and insane. Rain had already proceeded to take a shower and was getting dressed, so Mia picked her towels and headed for the bathrooms. The warm water soothed her nerves as she let out a sigh. Mia suddenly paused while soaping her face as she heard a sound. She listened for a while, but since she didn't hear anything afterwards, she continued to clean herself. She walked out of the bathroom with a towel tied to her chest as she opened her locker to pick her clothes, but her eyes widened in shock. What? My clothes? She exclaimed as she looked frighteningly into the empty locker. She glanced around the locker room, but it was empty, without a single person in sight. Who could have stolen my clothes? She searched frantically around but couldn't even find anything of hers. Her clothes, her bag, and her shoes had all disappeared. She opened Rain's locker, and it was also empty. Could Rain have been the one playing a prank on her? She mused, then shook off the thought. Rain did like to play pranks on her sometimes, but not this kind of prank. What was she going to do now? She couldn't just go out wearing nothing but a towel. She peeked into the martial arts hall first to see if she'd spot Rain or anyone else who could help, but not a single soul remained in there. Her phone was also in her bag, which had suddenly disappeared. She continued to look in every unlocked locker in the room but couldn't find any of her belongings.